Cześć Kasiolutki i witam z Dallas, Texas. W tym filmie poruszymy temat tego, jak polityka rasizmu wpłynęła na amerykańskie miasta. Choć nagrywam to z Dallas, Texas, nie jest to wyjątkowe do Dallas, Texas. Jest to historia wielu dużych miast w Stanach Zjednoczonych. I nagrywam to razem z Collinem. Jesteśmy właśnie w tej chwili na kampusie SMU, where you are a doctorate student. The reason I'm filming with Collin is because you wrote a book. Tell me a little bit about this book.
Yeah, so the book is Paved a Way, Infrastructure Policy and Racism in an American City. Dallas is that American city. So the book covers 5 neighborhoods in Dallas and looks at the ways different pieces of infrastructure, either a highway or a park, parking lots or zoning, all these types of ways that infrastructure interacted with racism and racial politics in destroying these neighborhoods or significantly impacting, in this case, Black and Mexican American neighborhoods in Dallas.
Where can people find this book?
Amazon, Audible, anywhere you can find a book.
A link in the description.
So it started with a class paper in one of my graduate classes. I was researching the context and impact of a highway, Central Expressway, which is just outside of campus, and as a highway I used all the time. During the process of doing that research, I found out that during the Reconstruction in the 90s, they had uncovered and moved the bodies of over 1,100 formerly enslaved people to make space for the highway. There was something that felt so wrong about that to me as an engineer, that we would do that. And as I kept digging and looking at other highways, I found other neighborhoods and other areas with similar stories. And that really frustrated me as a citizen of Dallas. So kind of the 3 main ways that this was done in Dallas's context was through the building of highways and expanding highways through neighborhoods.
Where we're driving through right now, this was like houses were in this.
Yeah, this was all houses, all through here. Through building public housing, so buying up land that people owned and turning them into renters. And then through the use of land use and zoning changes. So taking things that were residential, turning them commercial and things like that. Look right through there, you can see the El Phoenix restaurant, and that's the Mesa Maya, that's the tortilla factory. But that was all Little Mexico, and as you can tell, it's all skyscrapers now. It's a totally different landscape.
Zaczynamy od 10th Street, ponieważ jest to największy Freedmen's Town, który jest dalej intact w całych Stanach Zjednoczonych.
Freedmen's Town, they came about after the end of the U.S. Civil War in the 1960s, where people who were formerly enslaved would move across the country and open up new places for their families to live, new places to settle, where they were free from slavery, in theory. We're on Cliff Street, and then further up is Boswell Street, and that's what they were the first family, the Boswells were. They bought land. Records and evidence indicate a lot of people think that property was given just free to people who were formerly enslaved, but actually the evidence shows that no, people actually bought this land. They settled it, and they grew it from their own wealth, which is a really important thing to consider. So they they brought their families with them, and then they grew their families, and they started businesses. They built shops and places like that here, and really grew into this massive community within a very segregated city.
The reason that African Americans were able to buy the land was because investors were selling land because there was something like an economic crash. So land was sold in 10th Street area, and this is why a Freedmen's Town came to existence here.
Yeah, it gave a lot of opportunity for formerly enslaved people to buy land and to own land at really cheap prices. And so coming out of slavery, there was not a whole lot of generational wealth built. And so this was a massive godsend, if you will, to these neighborhoods. It allowed families to build homes and have access to things they might not have otherwise had access to.
And there's a style of house that's particular to Black communities of the time.
Yeah.
And it's called a shotgun house. Like origins are from West Africa?
Yeah, West African. In fact, that's a shotgun
that's
style
a shotgun
house
house.
Right there.
Okay. W latach 50. przez eminent domain 466 budynków oraz 12 bloków dzielnicy zostały kupione, zburzone. Zburzyli w ten sposób wybudowaną już dzielnicę, jedną z niewielu, gdzie czarnoskórzy mogli mieszkać w Dallas, żeby zbudować autostradę, żeby połączyć przedmieścia z centrum miasta. Taka segregacja miasta nosi ze sobą wiele różnych problemów, między innymi to, że bogactwo było skoncentrowane wśród białych dzielnic. Jest taka piosenka artysty John Mellencamp, w którym śpiewa o tym, że autostrada przecina przez ogródek czarnego Amerykana. Właśnie w ten sposób wiele tych dzielnic zaczęło widzieć swój rozpadek. Przez nie się budowało autostrady, żeby mieszkańcy innych dzielnic mogli dotrzeć do pracy, do centrum miasta. 10th Street zostało nazwanym dzielnicą historyczną, jednak w 10th Street 1/3 budynków została zburzona.
Yeah, so the city of Dallas had a demolition policy in place where you could get a faster demolition or an expedited demolition if a building was less than 3,000 square feet. And so in places like a Freedman's Town where people were building homes, they didn't have much money, so their homes were generally smaller. So in historic districts that are predominantly white, homes were much bigger, but homes that were in predominantly black or Mexican American neighborhoods in Dallas were generally smaller. So without saying it, they allowed black and brown neighborhoods and historic neighborhoods in Dallas to have homes demolished at a faster rate, as the shotgun homes were maybe 1,000 square feet. It's funny because that's exactly how systemic racism perpetuates, is because it's hard to put your hands around it. You're like, I don't understand how this could happen. And for something like a 3,000 square foot, on the surface you say, yeah, that makes sense. Maybe a small structure, like a garage or something, might be originally in your head of like, oh yeah, we need to demolish those kinds of things. But when you're not taking into account when the people who are most affected by that aren't a part of the process, and this is where the racism piece comes in, when a policy disproportionately affects a group, whether that's in our context here in Dallas, whether that's a black neighborhood, a Mexican American neighborhood, or any other neighborhood is disproportionately negatively impacted, that's where systemic racism comes in. It's the way that these policies perpetuate in real life. So where the highway is where a lot of the businesses used to be, just east of what we call Jefferson Avenue.
The fraying, is how you said it in the book, of this community started with the building of Clarendon Avenue or Clarendon Boulevard?
Yeah, Clarendon Avenue. That's over here on the other side of the neighborhood. So Clarendon kind of came in on one side, the highway came in on the other, and so you had these two pathways that kind of just cut through and reshaped the entire neighborhood.
This is Clarendon.
Yeah.
There were houses and businesses.
And that was actually a tram line went through there where those pillars are. So it used to be public transit that came all the way out here and served this community. But with the highway, they took it out. It was no longer needed, so it made everybody more dependent on cars and things like that. But yeah, we're now at the State Fair of Texas. It opens up next week, so there are way more people here than there would be normally. It's usually a ghost town. So we're in the parking lots of the State Fair of Texas. As you can see, they go on for what feels like miles. It's not miles, but as far as the eye can see, there's concrete. These actually all used to be homes. Where we're standing right now, this used to be a neighborhood, and the park was actually further back, closer to where the Ferris wheel is, and places like that. But in the 1960s, the city of Dallas decided they wanted to expand the parking lot. They actually did a study, and white people who came to the fair were uncomfortable that they were so close to black neighborhoods that were poorer. They did a study and asked people, like, flat out, if we built a parking lot, fenced it in, and made it lit up, and basically made it so you didn't have to see the black people near you, would you come here more often? And there's this great line where it says, the citizens of Dallas erupted with a yes. And so it's just like this horrible moment of white people in Dallas saying, yes, if we can come somewhere where we can feel comfortable and we don't have to see or interact with poor black people, then that's going to make this space better for us. And so the city brought that to life.
And this is actually documented.
Yeah.
It's not hidden.
They hired a consulting firm, and they have the report with the transcript in it and like the actual verbatim what people said. This consulting firm that they had come in to do research found in this city map where they had kind of drawn a line around this area, essentially saying no permits should be issued for this area for a certain amount of time. And so what that did is, when you don't have the ability to improve your property, you don't have the chance to fix your fence or things like that, then your property is going to decline because you can't get a permit. And so what happens is, when property declines, and when the city doesn't come out and fix the streets, doesn't fix the sidewalks, in effect, they create conditions of what in the US we call slums. And that makes it that much easier to then come and say, well, your property is worth less, so we're only going to offer you this much, and we're going to buy your property because we want to make this parking lot bigger. And so that's exactly what happened. But what's interesting, what they found, is that the black homeowners were only getting maybe 75 cents or 50 cents per square foot on their homes, where white property owners who didn't live in the neighborhood but owned property in the neighborhood and were renting it to black people in the neighborhood, they were getting 2 to 3 times that amount of money per square foot. And so there's this real inequity in how homes were valued based on who owned it and the race of who owned it. And it actually went to the Supreme Court in the United States as an issue of eminent domain and what we call due process. So it was actually a pretty big case after all.
Na polskie warunki jest to już bardzo duży parking, ale on się ciągnie jeszcze z pół mili w tamtą stronę i jest bardzo dużo innych tych parkingów dookoła. Cały ten obszar na State Fair, na którym są budynki, które stoją cały rok właśnie, żeby był ten State Fair, są tu też różne muzea. No, są pojedyncze budynki, które są używane poza tylko State Fair, ale nie jest to wystarczająco, żeby było właśnie tyle parkingów. Cały ten obszar ma prawie 300 akrów. Wyobraźcie sobie, że jesteście mieszkańcami danej dzielnicy, na przykład Fair Park tutaj, i zabrano Ci Twój dom i Twoją posiadłość, żeby wybudować parking, który jest używany, on stoi pusty, raz na rok w pełni. Samy State Fair, poza rasizmem w infrastrukturze, sam w sobie ma bardzo rasistowską historię. Z początku w ogóle nie było wolno czarnoskórom brać udział w State Fair, po czym wprowadzili jeden dzień, w którym mogą brać udział, ale w tym udziale, w którym mogą brać, to nie mogli korzystać z atrakcji takich jak gry czy jakieś tam wesołe miasteczka. Po czym w ogóle największy oddział Ku Klux Klan, czyli najbardziej taka znana rasistowska organizacja w Stanach, miała tutaj swój największy oddział. Mieli tutaj swoje dni Ku Klux Klan na State Fair. I to jest po prostu, to się działo w ciągu ostatniego stulecia.
So when we talk about spot zoning, they were one of the companies that was coming in, buying out homes, demolishing them, and then waiting to eventually one day to build things like this. And so they own a lot of these buildings over here. Harwood International has built a lot of these sky rises in this area. And in fact, you can see on the sign it says the Harwood District. So they're even trying to change the name of the area from what it was. Okay. It's already been done once. From Little Mexico to Uptown to now this Harwood district that they're trying to develop in their own name.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as Little Mexico, there just really isn't much else to show besides the park and the factory because all of it's been demolished and built over.
Yeah, the park, the public housing, and that's about it.
This park also has a prejudice history. 1930s, it became mixed use. Could you tell us a little about how that looked?
At the time, this was transitioning from a largely Jewish or white neighborhood at the time to a Mexican-American neighborhood at the time. There was the ability to use this space, but Mexican-Americans could only use it for large events like Mexican Independence Day, large cultural celebrations, and they could use this space right here. However, they couldn't use it just normally. They couldn't just use a park like we are right now. And then you have things like the pool. So any non-white child could use the pool in the summer, but only in the morning with the dirty water left over from the day before. And before the white kids would come, they would drain the pool and make the kids clean the pool before they refilled it with fresh water, and the white kids would come in later in the morning in the more desirable hours of the day when it was really, really hot. And there are some reports that white children would even pee in the pool the night before, knowing that children of color would come in the next day and would be swimming in that water.
Słuchałam podcastu ostatnio i ten temat się też przewinął przez książkę Collin, że w tym parku znajdował się basen, jak było wspominane. Kiedy segregacja została zakończona w latach 60., to żeby nie dzielić basen z czarnoskórymi osobami, zalali basen. Woleli nie używać basenu, zamiast żeby używać go wspólnie z czarnoskórymi osobami. Są różne baseny w różnych miastach po Stanach Zjednoczonych, które właśnie zostały zalane z tego powodu. Link do podcastu w opisie. Jest dużo takich mocnych dyskusji, no ale niewolnictwo się skończyło w XIX wieku, jak to jest, że dalej czarnoskóra społeczność, argumentu czemu są do tyłu. Jest dużo właśnie takiej polityki, wydarzeń, które nie są wystarczająco duże jak niewolnictwo, żeby ich tak zaznaczyć i wiedzieć o nich jako osoba nie mieszkająca w Stanach, a nawet jako osoba mieszkająca w Stanach, bo ja się muszę to uczyć dopiero poza szkołą, sama dla siebie. I jest to teraz moment właśnie w Stanach Zjednoczonych, kiedy dużo osób się uczy o tej historii ponownie w inny sposób niż to, co uczono nas w szkole.
Yeah, so the building is now named after Santos Rodriguez, and this statue over here is a memorial that was just put up, I think either in last year, for Santos. And so Santos Rodriguez was murdered by Dallas police in the 1970s. He was falsely charged with stealing candy, if I remember correctly. I may be getting that wrong. He and his brother were in the back of a police car, and the officer was playing, I don't know if this translates to Russian roulette, and pulled the trigger and shot Santos in the back of the car and murdered him. This has now been the place where the rallying cry was for the Mexican-American community in the wake of that murder. And so now this park bears his name in ways so that he's never forgotten by the city.
Przerwa na obiad w jeden z niewielu budynków, które zostało po Little Mexico. To kiedyś była fabryka robienia tortilli, więc adekwatnie teraz jest to restauracją meksykańską. Taki Tex-Mex bardziej. I ja sobie zamówię mole. Jest tak gorąco, że nie można się doczekać, aż się wyjdzie do ochłodzonej restauracji, ale tak chłodzą w restauracjach, że nie można się doczekać, aż się wyjdzie znowu na ten gorąc. Dzisiaj jest jakieś 35 odczuwalna.
When they say this is the Black Highland Bark of Dallas, they were not kidding. Like, the homes in this neighborhood were big and were nice.
To była największa dzielnica czarnoskóra, największy Freedmen's Town. Te domki, które tam stały, były bardzo dużymi, pięknymi domami. Jest tam jeden taki biały, który stoi starszy. No i zostały zburzone na potrzeby rozbudowania dróg.
The Christian cemetery is over here, and then beyond that, the Catholic or the Jewish cemetery and the Black cemetery.
There is still remnants of the Black cemetery.
Yes.
Okay, and then there's the Freedmen's plaque, which is the...
It's a big memorial.
Okay, memorial. Jest to około 5000 nieoznaczonych grobów, co pozostało po Freedmen's Town, czyli największą dzielnicą czarnych osób w Dallas, która liczyła około 15 000, jeśli się nie mylę, i miała około 5000 domów. Co pozostało jest szkoła, kilka budynków, naprawdę kilka, na ręce można policzyć. I właśnie ten memorial zbudowany na cześć tego cmentarza, który tu kiedyś był, i tej dzielnicy, która tu była. Słychać auta obok, bo właśnie autostrady prowadziły do rozpadku tych dzielnic i kupowania tych posiadłości przez eminent domain, i tyle zostało. Ciężko właśnie potomkom niewolników gromadzić czy wzbogacać się, jak jest im to odbierane, i historia właśnie Stanów Zjednoczonych pokazuje, że to wiele razy się powtarzyło. Nie jest to wyjątkowe do Dallas. Czasami właśnie było to w przypadkach takich jak tu w tym filmie opisuje, że przez politykę i awansowanie miasta te dzielnice cierpiały, a czasami bardzo brutalnie było to też robione, jak w przypadku Tulsa. Jeśli nie znacie historii Tulsa, to bardzo polecam Was, żeby szybko to zgooglować. Jest to temat cały osobny na osobny film, ale brutalne właśnie morderstwo dzielnicy czarnoskórej.
So we just crossed over Hall Street, which was the economic heart of the North Dallas Freedmen's Town, but there's nothing left. It was wall-to-wall businesses, and now it's condos and other faceless places. Structures, yeah. So we're driving right through right now. This was part of North Dallas. Yeah, everything that was here was homes. If you had this strip of land cleared in your neighborhood, that'd be pretty shocking, wouldn't it? Because this lay vacant for years before they ever built this in the 70s and 80s. Old money. All the new money typically lives in the outer suburbs.
What's old money in Texas? Like oil? And oil. Yeah. Okay. Idziemy teraz przed przedmieście Highland Park. I Highland Park jest właśnie jednym z tych przedmieści, do których budowano autostrady kosztem innych dzielnic. Jest to dalej nadal jedna z still primarily white suburb. Jest to widocznie bogata dzielnica z dużymi, wielkimi chatami. Bardzo wielkimi chatami. Jest tu zauważalna różnica w infrastrukturze. Chodniki są wszędzie, nie są pęknięte, nie są zarośnięte, ulice są oświetlone. Ten film jest tylko jakiś ułamek tego tematu, ale jeśli ciekawią Was takie tematy, bardzo polecam, żebyście obejrzeli film, który nagram w ostatnim roku, który się nazywa Życie za 30 000 kontra 180 000. Będzie zalinkowany gdzieś tutaj, się pojawi i też w opisie. Dziękuję Wam bardzo za oglądanie dzisiejszego odcinka. Podziękujcie też Collinowi w komentarzach. Thank you so much for all your help in this and for giving me all the knowledge and help allowing me to share this with all my viewers. Thank you so much. Yeah. I do zobaczenia w następnym odcinku. Pa, pa.
Just.
People love that.